All right, I'm back. I'm doing a little emergency broadcast here. It's not my usual late night time because I want to run a test out before I had the big Thanksgiving week fest of streams and my run through of my presentation regarding my PRR mainline signaling. That's going to be next week. I don't think anyone's here to hear this, but I might try to get this video live a little bit later. But anyone who was actually watching last Saturday might have noticed I had some technical difficulties. Again, I know looks like I'm running something like Windows 98, but this is Windows 7. But the issue was not OS based. It was a hardware fault. But since I'm now talking to nobody, I'm just going to talk for a bit and see if anyone shows up, and then I'll go into what happened. But if anyone who was here saw the stream last time or tunes into this when I post this video, I did have a bit of a hardware. I did end up actually having a hardware fault. It was easily correctable, but it took most of the night and to diagnose it. So, but I'm here today, and I'm going to be doing another. I'm going to be rerunning the live stream I started last week. This is, again, mainly a test so I can be ready for when I do a whole bunch of streaming next week for Thanksgiving. Anyway, the point of this video is this was taken back. These pictures were taken back in September. It's dated September the 11th of 2004. This would have been in conjunction with just some sort of random trip I was taking back to Philly. I'm not sure exactly why, but most of these photos were taken around 30th Street Station. And part of the event was that they were opening what is known as the Circus Center, which is that office building that's been to the north of 30th Street Station for about the last 15 years, and its associated parking garage. The reason the parking garage is so special is for years the parking roof deck at 30th Street, which you can see right here, the remains of it, which was a single level deck over the tracks, 10 tracks right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is it 10? I thought it was 10. Okay, oh, so those are stubs. Whatever. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Any attempt to take photos from that would, whether it was officially permitted or not, the security guys in the booth would pounce all over people, possibly because they're worried about crime, but possibly because they were dickheads. But you couldn't get more than 5 photos before you would get thrown off the deck, and sometimes the police would get involved, and it was always a pain. It wasn't just me. It only happened to me once, but I heard stories from all sorts of people who would try to take photos off the roof deck. And because there wasn't like the typical catenary shields, they just had these sort of like metal plates under there, so you had a decent view of the tracks coming in. However, the Circus Center, with its brand new 8-story parking garage, was effectively impossible to police in that way. If they had any cameras, still to this day, they're only up near the elevators, and no one really cares to go all the way up there to harangue you. So if you go in there and you don't stay there all day, it's perfectly fine to go get photos of the entire Race Street engine terminal. You can see the Race Street engine terminal, Philadelphia coach yards, which are mainly mainly empty now. And this was sort of the first time that you could get up there. So this was sort of a fun experience. Anyway, we're just going to start here with the Philadelphia skyline. This is in 2004, so you can see through to. Let me see if anybody's actually watching. I got people watching. Hey, everybody. So I'm going to go into what happened. I'll talk in a second, but let me just start. I'm going to be rerunning the attempted stream from Saturday, and then getting into the rest of it. So anyway, before they built those Comcast USB sticks, you can actually see the suburban station complex there. There we got City Hall. The Liberty Towers, which is buildings bigger than City Hall, the Blue Cross Blue Shield building, and these two pyramid ones, that's where the Conrail headquarters used to be up until 1999. You could see, they used to, I remember walking in front of those buildings and you'd see the Conrail, name as one of the tenants there. So that was always interesting. And today you have those giant Comcast Tower USB sticks, which are pretty much built on. If you go to the live, sorry, that's not the live stream. If you go to the overhead, there's your suburban station, There's your there's the Comcast tower or techno. There's the tower or whatever, the Comcast center and the tower were built on what were I think there was like an ice rink and a parking lot there. So anyway, I don't need to blather too much. I don't have a lot of time today, so I'm hoping to make this as short as possible. Here we see what used to be the Philadelphia Electric Company building. I believe it's still their regional offices, but it's owned by Exelon, which is out of Illinois, I think. I don't know where their headquarters are. And of course, we have the the Chinese Wall, the thing that would connect to Broad Street Station, which is why we have all these wonderful office towers, because in 1927 they moved that underground. Like I said, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember if this is before or after they did the. It looks like it's after they did the catenary rehabilitation. So anyway, I'm just gonna go through these first two here. I explained this last time. So what happened was, for all the people who are actually now watching, if you are on for my aborted stream on Saturdays, that one of my SATA controllers on the motherboard was failing. That's what was causing the weird write delays and the other issues. After that, I mean, it was manifesting the fact that a lot of times the devices would just on that channel would just vanish. So I'd get like a no boot device thing, and then a power cycle the computer, and that would magically fix it. But that was ultimately what the issue was. It took me a bit of futilely trying to get the machine to boot and taking forever for it to boot. Because there was all sorts of write delays going on, and then that caused all sorts of disk errors that required scan disk to fix, etc., etc. So that's why I got knocked off for the rest of the night, just trying to fix the machine. But everything's working, everything's fine. Gave me an opportunity to apply updates, which I had not been doing for a while, just due to not having time to deal with this. Anyway, back on the roof deck, here's some of the beautiful things you could see. Now, since this time, they have put up like screens on the track side, so you don't get a good view out except in those sort of stairway bays or up at the top. But at this point, I'm not sure those screens weren't there, or you were on the roof deck, and you could see all sorts of fun things from the Schuylkill Expressway to what did I just do? To an Amtrak GP7 number 77. This is back, again, before they replaced them with their GP15Ds, another yard power that they got. They were still using these and a bunch of other, so they had some CF7s and some other early Jeeps running around. And I think that these were see, they've got this intake there that sort of indicates that they might have been a rebuild, but everything I said that they were a GP7. So being a GP7 mean it would have the original 567 engine, instead of something that had been rebuilt with 645 power assemblies. Also, in historic things, we have Amtrak road railers used in their express services. This was in service through 2005 as one of their attempts to make money in the express freight business. So this is just interesting, it's sort of, again, you forget you sort of have these photos. Let me just make sure I got this all going here. Here we go. So there you go, one of their maintenance of way. Both Amtrak and CSX used to do that thing where they would paint their maintenance of way. Yeah, I'm just going to overwrite this file. They used to paint their maintenance of way in bright orange. But now having dedicated maintenance of way fleets is something that I think railroads tend to just not bother with anymore. I always thought it was a good idea, but again, it requires you to have a dedicated pool. Here we now have one of Amtrak's GP40Hs. I think it looks like number 523. Those are still on the roster. They are repainted. they're known as GP40 TCs for Toronto Commuter. They're basically a GP40 with some head-end power capabilities. Today, I think they're known as they might just be. I think they're like a GP38-3H. Amtrak kept the HEP but took off the turbo. They're typically used for maintenance of way, but they can rescue trains in a pinch and provide head-end power. So they're kind of on Johnny on the spot NEC rescue trains. When the electric breaks down and it's cold, they got to get something out with power. That's what they use. Also, here we have one of the new HHP8s, new at the time. Public service announcement on the HHP8. Besides the fact you might have heard that Amtrak's now involved in a lawsuit regarding their early retirement and their leaseholders. Another thing that I do is every so often when I'm in terms of naming conventions. Where can I find this stuff? Okay, here it goes. If for things like for popular locations like Race Street or DC Union Station, I will often just put that instead of putting I usually put the location after the number, but I sort of have a sub practice of if it's like Race Street or a couple other places, putting that first. I don't know, it's sort of a special thing that I do. But anyway, one sec, let me just get on with it. There you go. Race Street and a dash. Cool. That's just what I was doing. Anyway, the general scuttlebutt, as I'm sure everyone has heard, is that the HHP8s were ... unreliable, etc. I'm still trying to figure out what was actually wrong with them. I've never had anyone ever say what would always fail on them. And besides people complaining about unspecified software problems, the thing about unspecified software problems is that you can fix unspecified software problems because it's software. So the fact that Mark has decided to continue using its HHP8s and has refurbished them, and apparently that's resolved some of the reliability issues, might indicate that the story of HHP8 unreliability is not entirely accurate or is not as simple as it sounds. Amtrak was engaged in a very complicated leaseback situation. This means that instead of buying them outright, they went through this arrangement where they would other companies would buy them and then lease them to Amtrak. There were some tax advantages for this back in the day. Public agencies like Amtrak or whatever would always do these leasebacks just because, like I said, it would allow the leaser to take the depreciation and turn it into a tax write-off. ... But I'm wondering if it's that while the HHPs might have problems, the problems were never addressed because you got into this sort of whose responsibility is it to fix them? You know, is it Bombardier's? Is it the leaser? Is it Amtrak's? They probably were all pointing fingers at each other, resulting in no one ever wanting to fix them. They never got fixed, and then Amtrak wanted to just found money to get rid of them. Anyway, here we have the whole Race Street engine facility. Some interesting things here. In addition to 523, we have another at GP40 TC number 527. Fairly new P42 DC one number 165, and new. We have some new New Jersey Transit ALP 46s. These were used on Clocker trains, which also ran until 2025. Finally, we have a Phase 4 P40 number 830 there. And finally, what's this other guy here? Number 72, P42. So it's a whole potpourri of fun things here. So I'm just going to try to figure out how I can write them all out. 830 and let me see if I can write which 4615, and I can't tell what that other one is down there. All right. But Race Street always used to have interesting things, but since the ASC 86s came online, it's kind of meh. additional. Sort of hard when we've got that above angle. It's kind of hard to figure out how to do your camera, and you get these bizarro. Yeah, I probably should have aligned this better, but I'm just gonna save it as is. And we have your 527 and 165 are the stars of this photo. That's what I'm gonna limit it to. Let's see if I can go on here and just see if they've renumbered them or what they. I think they're GP30H-3s. Let's see here. Maybe this one will have what I need. Rebuilt, you have GP30H-2. So there you go. For what it's worth, that's what they are known as today. Let's see if they kept them. Yeah, they're 520 to 527 GP38H-3. -3, so this one's probably more accurate. I thought they were -3. Yeah, they dumped the turbo, but they kept the HEP. Here we have one of their legit GP38s. I don't know if they still have these around or not. Well, I probably shouldn't have closed that Amtrak roster window. Let's see if this is the 700 series. SW1. Yeah, the 720 to 724 were rebuilt as GP38-3s. So this one is still around. That's why we got those GP7s. I mean, they just held on to stuff for forever. So here we have number P42, number 11, ALP 46, 4615, and 723. Pretty easy editing these guys. I mean, there's just not much lot going on here. I can probably see if I can adjust the straighten this guy out. I'm losing some stuff off the edge, but as long as I don't cut off the locomotive, there we go. That's a bit better. Nice angle. Fun fact about the ALP 46 is they do not have resistance grids. Neither do the ASC 86s either. They all the HEP on these is dumped. So if they go in the dynamic, this is 4626. All the HEP load is taken up by the HVAC completely. There's about a megawatt worth of HVAC load on any given train, and it's always there. You don't need to sync it into anything else in the block. Europe, when they do regenerative braking, or in a lot of subway systems, they always have to find ways to either do temporary storage or match it with other things in the block. In North America, we don't have that problem. You're either going to be heating or cooling 365 days a year. So they ever since both the ASC 86s, all the new engines don't bother with HEP grids. They either have some. I think they have some internal stuff they can drop some resistance load into. But most of it just goes into the HEP load of the train. And if the train's too short, well, they don't really need, they just use the friction brakes at that point. There's not as much energy to displace. Here we have 4601. I think the first one was 4600, but I'm not sure. Either way, these were used for both testing on the NEC and for the clockers. Their first assignment was pretty much the clockers because the NJT Amtrak basically was told them, that was one of the arrangements early on, NJT, because I rode a clocker back in the day before right before they were gotten rid of. And leaving Philadelphia, it was like, oh, why did they, like, boy, Amtrak's short-sighted. That was such a great market. It's like, it wasn't a great market. Very few people rode it to Trenton. I mean, the coach I was in was almost empty. Very few people got on the train, especially after Amtrak had to raise its pass rates. And then as soon as the train hit Trenton, it just filled up. So all it was doing was Trenton, Princeton Junction, and NJT, and the NJT was supplying the locomotive for it. And eventually Amtrak was just, hey, do you just want these slots into Penn Station for more express runs? And they're like, sure. Also, this was in before they built the Morrisville yard, so it was also helping out alleviate train set congestion at Trenton. So here we have 72, like I said, 830. And NJT, this one was 4610. Oh, those things are getting pretty old for NJT years. You think they're going to start aching for something new. That's apparently what NJT, use it up, throw it away. As long as the feds pay. So you have the Ray Street Terminal. So I'm going to throw a plus in there, 823. Not so much goes on here anymore. They don't have. This is back. All those P40s are because the Harrisburg line was running diesel still. So what's this? What is this one here? That's strange. Crap, don't have a lot of time left, but let's see if what's going on here. Oh, so the clockers were Amtrak. The PRR used to run a Philly to New York service every hour, and they basically just called it a clocker. I mean, that was the whole point. It was like their version of a regional, but it made a bunch more stops. I forget where all it would stop, but they would run GG1 powered trains. I think it was Philly. It would come out of Suburban. Might have gone to DC. I'm not sure. It was kind of half regional and half something else. So Amtrak would keep running these things. It was usually cut back to Philly to New York. There were morning commuter runs, so about 3 in the morning, 3 in the evening. They would use AEM. They would use E60s as the power because they were the only things that had the tractive effort for it. And then like 10 AM fleets, like this huge. They are hugely long. And then NJT at some point when the E60s were out, Amtrak NJT offered because if you had an NJT monthly, were accepted on the train. It was unreserved for an Amtrak ticket or an NJT monthly. And eventually, Amtrak just gave the slots to NJT to run Trenton Expresses, and that was because 90% of the ridership just got on at Trenton with an NJT monthly. Because to ride it from Philly, you'd have to buy an Amtrak monthly or whatever, and those Congress got mad at Amtrak for deeply discounting those. So the ticket price went up to like $1,500 a month. So people would just ride, like the clockers were slower, so people just started to end up riding regionals. Why is this picture there? We're going to have a nice little conversation on CSX maintenance practices in a few minutes, but let's finish up what we're doing on here at Ray Street. Another nice wide picture here. There's 4610. Behind him, it looks like 720 and 724, 654, 7, and another Jeep 764. Yeah, that's one thing I think you don't notice. The newer generations of the diesels have a flat roof, where those first generations of the EMD diesels have that cute little round roof. So I'm just gonna like start doing this up now because I'm gonna forget all these. So we have 523, 720, 724, 654, and 764. Plus 720 plus 724 plus 764 plus 654 plus 4610. Yep, that looks good. It's level. It's level enough. It's this is a very this is a fairly this looks like a rebuilt AEM 7AC. For all those people who dump on U.S. trains, the AEM 7AC was the first locomotive in the world to use IGBT solid state power inverters. So, it's not, you can't always go, oh my God, Europe. And these were excellent, but like I said, Amtrak can only get money when it gets money. So that's why they completely replaced their fleet with the ASC 86s. You don't, if you're Amtrak in your you don't know where your next meal's coming from you, don't turn down a free one. I can never remember which ones were rebuilt, which ones weren't. It's not like, it's not like this to this. It's this and this and this and this and these and whatever. You have to sort of know the chart. Here we have that 770 again with this cut of road railers. Those would probably likely be going out on the Pennsylvanian that day. And again, here we have diesels that are probably ready to roll on a Keystone train. It was about this time when Keystone trains went from 3 cars to 5, and they've stayed that way ever since. Huh. What's that on? 146. This is definitely shot with a piece of glass in between, so this is probably taken from one of the stairwells. Today, those stairwells have gotten a little gross. The windows have gotten a little less clear, so it's not quite as a good, nice way to take pictures. And I usually avoid it now, or the time of day or whatever. You can get a lot of reflection in those windows. And there we go. The Keystones are clearly, here we are. There's still 3. Yeah, and that's going to be the one we just saw. So he was coming out, and here he is in Penn interlocking. Art Museum right there, but I'm going to crop it out. It's a little distracting. Ray Street there in the bottom. Probably crop it like right to there. Now my camera can zoom in on this better, but again, for those of you who don't know these streams, this is a 3 megapixel camera with a 3x zoom, so. All right, that's it for 30th Street. So, when I was living in Baltimore, 6354. Let's just check that out right now. I said, next to Baltimore Beltline. First, it's the thing that runs around up from the Inner Harbor up to the Philly sub. It was built in the 1890s. Baltimore is challenging geography. A lot of it has a 2% grade. It was electrified back in 1896 through the 1950s using third rail power assist locomotives to prevent steam from having to asphyxiate the crews in the tunnels, blah, 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 blah. So this looks like a GP40-2 here on a work train. Now, back when I first moved into the place, this cut, this is running between Charles and St. Paul Street in Baltimore, was a bit wild. So it was, and this is all, I would always make it worse. And that, there was this swamp and trees and stuff, and I would always, if I didn't want rot, I didn't have a good place to do composting, so I'd run it down to this cut and throw it into the CSX swamp down there. I'm always trying, composting is one of the easiest ways to be, it's if you want to be, if you want to do something, if you want to waste less and try to sequester carbon, composting is the way to go, as opposed to just throwing it in a trash can. So I was always a strong compost person, or I'd be left with various rottables, so I'd run them down and just throw them in this swamp here. But unfortunately, in 2004, CXS finally sent one of their little maintenance things around to ruin the fun little swamp. And I'll show you what's going on here. Let me just see. I might just reuse the original file names if I can find them. No, I am not going to, because I used a bad naming convention. See, I was doing the same thing where I'm putting, like, most of the situations I want to have the lead with the number so I can search through locomotive numbers. Now that more things are being retired, I actually care about finding those locomotives first as opposed to locations. But I used to put the sub name because it was just like all these Baltimore photos. But anyway. So this is a very, very pretty locomotive. I'm not sure which this. I can always check the diesel shop. I'm really running out of time here, but I can get through this pretty quick. They clearly were built with dynamics. The diesel shop should tell me 63 something something. What was that number? 6354. These look like ex-Seaboard coastlines, so they had dynamics very well. These are just when the dark future paint scheme was new. Yeah, and so here we have what the CSX version of a slot train, only without a gondola, just using a flat car with some rails on it to keep the doohickey from falling off. And what they were just basically excavating this wonderful little forest there, unfortunately. This is where I will put the subdivision name in, but I'm going to reference location. See, at the time, I really thought, they keep trying to fix the drainage in this thing, and it just never works. It's just always flooded, and the tracks are always pumping. It's just a giant wet spot. But here they're actually trying to do something about it after about a year or two of just this growing higher and higher. Eventually, they filled it with riprap after the tunnel wall collapsed, and that has done a good job of keeping it down. But like I said, I would just always I always want to get the forest to come back, so I would do my best to engage in appropriate composting. But it's just digging up the ballast and trying to make some sort of whatchamacallit there. Here we have our side dump that's taking all the mud and trees. You can see how much these are just junk. These are junk trees. There's some sort of invasive species, I'm sure. I'll get through this pretty quick. The tops, the whatever was growing there was rapidly reaching the lip of the cut. You'll also remember this again. This is where this wall collapsed in 2014. It wasn't the railroad's issue. It's not the railroad's issue with the drainage. There was a sinkhole going on behind it, and then suddenly the wall just collapsed. So I think it was mainly a city drainage problem. But you can see why. There's just a lot of water in the area. You'll notice that I'm not having any issues with drive rights. And since that's been everyone was always asking like, what's wrong with your computer? Why is it so slow? Why is it doing this? Why is it doing that? Well, it's because the SATA controller on the motherboard was failing. And eventually it just got to a point where it gave up, and that's why the writes were always delayed. Why I would get hangs. It was the controller card was failing. Well, not the card again. The controller, whatever's on the motherboard. Apparently, drive controller failures aren't that uncommon. I mean, maybe they're more common than other stuff, and they're more like both IDE and say I've had IDE controllers fail. It's just there's a lot of you get a lot of oddness with voltages on there. So from what's been described to me is that just the solid state components on that are subject to fairly higher voltage spikes than on other things in the computer, just going out to the drive and what the drive's putting on the line, and eventually some of them will just start failing, or you'll get like the whatever the micro component, the transistors and stuff on the chips will just start going. So look for me this Saturday night. That is where I'm going to be probably doing my practice session. I will be coming in from a trip up to Reading that day, but that's going to be, I need to get the presentation actually compiled this week, and I was going to thinking of streaming it from my main computer, but I don't really feel like installing XSplit or all the other software I need for that down there. So I'm probably just going to need to have a 2-hour session Saturday night. Where I'm going to be just going through the whole damn thing. It's probably going to take between 90 minutes and 2 hours, hopefully closer to 90 minutes, because I've gone long on these before. I only come in every years to these presentations, but in theory it should be an hour to 90 minutes. But I think I can get it done. I might. If you keep people's attention, you can keep it there for 2. And here we go. And this should be our last picture today. Thank you for tuning in. Like I said, this was a test run of just my setup to make sure everything was working properly. As you can see, it is. So you can stop making fun of my old computer. Again, computers last longer these days, and it was a legit hardware failure, not just, it's not riddled with malware or anything else like that. Here we have the cab. This is, again, just typical GP40s doing its thing. This train would show up, the slot thing, I remember this day. The slot jobber would do its job, and then when the hopper would fill up, it would trundle off somewhere to unload, and then it would show up about 30 minutes later. I was just working there all day or for a number of hours, probably on a whatever call, some sort of weekend thing. Anyway. That's it for this, and let's just see who's still around. Yeah, random the picture of my PC. No, that was my old. I can get it back here. Sometimes I forget why I took this picture. I still use this case, but I just keep swapping the internals out. But yeah, that's nothing. I think that was just me showing someone what was coming out. It was before social media, so it was always like it was like the show us what's coming out the back of your computer challenge. Today it would be like a Twitter meme, but back then it wasn't. Anyway, I gotta get rolling. I really do get rolling. The newer versus old one is that I just I don't have the time every night to do a stream like this for my new stuff because I'm multitasking. I'm listening to videos. I'm doing all this other stuff. Here, when I'm at my parents' house, I don't have anything else going on. I don't have any other demands. Also, I don't have anything to talk about for the new stuff. It's just watch me process 500 photos of an interlocking. And back in the day when I only had 90 photos, they tend to be a little bit more interesting to talk about. And the historical stuff. The modern things, it's just, I wouldn't have it. I just don't have it in me. Anyway, have a great day, and I will see everybody here next Saturday.